Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this first day of the DevOps conference, the real conference. My name is Michiel Rook. Today I will be talking to you about leadership. I am a freelance consultant, CI/CD coach from the Netherlands. And some of you may have seen me in the previous iteration of this conference, last year in Munich here as well, in November. And this talk was created by me as a response to what we are going through as an industry, the questions that we are asking ourselves and the challenges that are put towards us. Because in this day and age of modern software development, there's a big question, and I'll get down to that. This is the background, this is what triggered my talk. In the modern day of software development, we are thinking about and talking about terms such as lean, agile, and of course the thing behind this whole conference, DevOps. And as Werner Vogels stated it 10 years ago very succinctly, and nobody's been able to put it succinctly as he was, you build it, you run it. This has serious ramifications for the way we develop software, the way we do things compared to the traditional way. It says something about the responsibility that a team gets, accepts, lives up to. It also says something about autonomy. There's a famous example in the Netherlands where there's a company which by now has fully autonomous, and I mean fully autonomous teams. All the managers there were essentially let go. And they are in control of their own budgets, their own clients, and all those things. So they are really autonomous. As a matter of fact, they're looking at giving the people in the team shares. So they will actually be owners of the company rather than just employees. But autonomy is a difficult to grasp concept. There's a lot of companies out there that say we have autonomous teams, we have self-driving teams. But when it really comes down to it, the really nitty-gritty, nasty decisions are not theirs to make. They don't have the budget to do the things that they need to do. So are they really autonomous? Do they have enough flexibility and enough room to self-organize? And where is their limits, or where are their limits? Where is their ceiling, if you will? So with all these things in mind, autonomy, self-organization, is there still role for a leader in lean, agile, DevOps style way of working? I think so, and I'll spend the next 40 or so minutes trying to explain why I think so, and then hopefully we can come to a nice discussion about this. And the reason I think I have something to say about this subject is my history, which in IT for the past, well, almost 15 years at this point, starting to feel old a little bit. I've been a developer, I've been a coach, a trainer, a speaker, such as today. I've been a lead developer, chapter lead, and a scrum master at certain points in time. So there's a little bit of leadership going on in my career, in my IT career for the past 10 to 15 years. But there's another part about me that is not very well known, and I don't talk a lot about it, except for during this talk. And that is in my free time, such as there is, I'm an officer in the Dutch Army Reserves, which means this year, up to including now, I've spent about 500 hours on a second job, if you will. So a career besides my career. The Dutch Army Reserves we are a component of about 3,000 soldiers. We regularly train. You can consider us part-time soldiers. We regularly train for the security and defense of our country, the Netherlands. I'm a platoon leader, which means that I'm responsible for the safety, well-being, and education of 35 of my soldiers. And that is a significant responsibility, because ultimately we are training to respond to crises within the Netherlands or potentially outside of our borders if need be as well. And so there's leadership on that level as well, but it's slightly different from IT leadership, as you might expect. So that's my story. There's a big disclaimer today, and that is that what I am about to tell you is my view on leadership. And there's a significant and strong survivor bias in that, of which I'm well aware, because I've done things which have worked for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will work for you or work for you always. This is not a leadership course that can take many weeks, months, even years. This is a treatment on some of the traits that I think are important for a leader to have today in IT. Before we get going, though, I would like to know a little bit more about the audience that I'm looking at right now. So who considers themselves to be in a leadership role right now? Awesome, that's about half. Okay, of the people that did not raise their hands, who of you have ambitions to go there in the next 5 years or so? Awesome. And for the rest of you that did not raise their hand for the first two questions, this may help you understand your leader a little bit better, why they do the things that they do or why they don't. A leader finds themselves in a context. And there's a lot to this context, but I will start with the absolute beginning of it, because what a leader finds themselves confronted with are groups of individuals. And in IT, that may be a developer, a tester, maybe an ops engineer. All these different roles, all are individuals. In the case of the army, it will be the individual soldier. And the nice thing about the individual is that, like the iceberg, and much to the chagrin of the Titanic captain, when he crashed into an iceberg, he found out that only a little bit of the iceberg is above the waterline. And this is pretty much what you and I are all about. What I can see now, what you see when you look at me, is only the top of the iceberg, the top of me as a personality. You only see a few things, but all the rest that you are unable to see is below the waterline, is hidden from view. And this is where the iceberg model, coined by a famous psychologist, McClelland, comes from. And what he says is that above the waterline is people's behavior. So you see me walking around on stage. You see other people, you see people in your team doing things. You see behavior. That's observable. That's visible. Knowledge is visible. Skills are visible. You can see people driving a car. That's a skill. Right? You can observe that is happening. So above the waterline, you can see what people do. You can observe that. However, there's a lot more, there's much more to a person than just what they do, than just what is observable. So below the waterline are things like opinions, values, self-image. What do you think of yourself? What do you think of the world? What do you think is important? What do you think should happen? Political views, potentially. Values, those things. So what do you think? That is below the waterline. And even deeper below the waterline are qualities, driving factors, motivation. Why do you do the things you do? What drives you? What motivates you? What do you want? What do you want as a person? Now, as a leader, it's very important to be aware of this large part, the largest part actually, below the waterline. So if you only look at what people do, you are missing a lot of information about a person. And it requires investment in time to go below the waterline on an individual. And it requires time to get to know a person. It requires time to get to know why people do the things they do and why they don't. And you can ask, it's important to keep asking questions. Keep asking why, and keep asking what's behind an action of a person? What's behind behavior? Because behavior doesn't appear automatically. There's always a reason behind behavior, even though the reason may not be consciously available for that person, but you can together come to that. But as a leader, it's very important to be aware of this. There's a lot more interesting literature on the iceberg, on McClelland's iceberg model. He even wrote it's a very thick book, but it's very interesting. So if you want to read up on that, Human Psychology by McClelland, very interesting. Now, we're talking about individuals, but individuals as a group make up a team, right? We're looking at a scrum team. We're looking at a 2-pizza team. We're looking at a squad of soldiers. We're looking at a team of salespeople. We're looking at a team of managers. We're looking at, teams. Groups of people that are put together or that come together for a common purpose and that do something together or that try to do something together. As a leader, you need to be aware of your team, its composition, and its maturity. Are you dealing with a team that is composed of brand new engineers right out of university, for example? Or are you looking at a team which has been basically battle tested, has run multiple complicated applications in production at scale for the past 10 years? They know the ropes, they know the things they need to do. High-performing teams, stuff like that. A team has a responsibility. Typically, teams get assigned responsibility. But are they mature enough to actually deal with that responsibility? Do they have the tools to deal with that responsibility? Do they have the freedom of movement to deal with that responsibility? As a leader, you need to be aware of that. How much responsibility can you give a person? How trustworthy is the team, but how much trust also is within the team, from individual to individual within the team? Do people in the team trust each other? Do they cover for each other when somebody makes a mistake? Do they help each other when somebody makes a mistake, when somebody has a bad day? Or do they leave each other out in the cold? I've seen both happen. Are teams autonomous? And if so, in what shape? Are they fully autonomous or not autonomous? And is there 50% autonomy? I don't know. This is something as a leader that you need to be concerned about. And then the leader themselves. They find themselves in a context where they need to, at this point, we have a tech lead, we have lead developers, we have chapter leads. Departments had test managers, IT managers, development managers, you name it. There's a whole bunch of potential leadership positions. And that also brings me to my next point, leaders and managers. Now, when you look up leaders and managers on Google, immediately a whole bunch of funny memes comes up. This one, for example, the archetype manager from Office Space. If you've not seen this movie, by all means, go find it and view it. This is the archetype manager. I need you to come in on Saturday and I need you to come in on Sunday. Kathy said it once, managers light a fire under people and leaders light a fire in people. Or one of the most well-known memes, I would say, about leaders versus managers. Now, as with any good meme, it has its source and there's a grain of truth in it, right? And there's a couple of questions that I associate with this topic and that I would like to ask to you. Is a manager always a leader? What do you think? No? No, I don't think so either. Can a leader be a manager? Not necessarily. Very good. I don't think so either. Some people definitely can. But I've seen great leaders suck at management. Depending on how you define management, if we define management in the traditional way, like HR duties, budget responsibility, things like that, I've seen great leaders be very irresponsible about budgets, which is fine. But then the question is, can a manager be a leader? Yeah. Should they be? Well, I think so. I think so. The other way around, not necessarily. But to me, it's all about attitude. Leadership is all about attitude, not about the position. Has anybody ever worked at a company where you see stuff like this? To me, that when I see something like this, after I've stopped laughing, I will probably tell somebody that I laughed a whole lot when I saw this at the company. Because what this indicates to me is that the leader thinks themselves to be very important, and more important than everybody else. And they may well be, when you ask people that are, at that level. But in all honesty, I would want the janitor to park there. Because what happens to the office building when the janitor is not able to come into the office building? There's not going to be happening a lot. Whereas if the CEO is missing, who's going to notice? A good CEO, people will not find out he's missing for quite a while. Whereas with a janitor, you will find that out within a few hours potentially already. So whenever I see stuff like this, and I was I heard about a Dutch company that they had a parking garage, and their parking garage was going through maintenance, so they had to close it. So what they did was actually block off half or a part of the parking garage for the CEO, the CTO, etc., so they could park right next to the building, and all the other employees, the rest of the company, essentially, the 99% of the company, they had to walk 10 minutes to an off-site parking garage. I'm not sure whose time is more valuable. Well, if you look at it in pure euros per hour, potentially the CEO's time is more valuable. I'm not so sure though. But as Donald McGannon said, leadership is all about action and not position. So being bombarded manager, that does not make you a leader. Now, moving on to leaders in modern delivery teams. Modern day software delivery teams. They see a number of challenges thrown at them. Just look at this. This is an iPhone. It's an iPhone 8. But remember, for those of you that still remember a day without the smartphone. Not vividly, but I remember that. And I remember how completely our world has changed over the past 10, 12 years. The amount of things that I do on this phone that I wasn't able to do 15 years ago is staggering. And also the way that it has influenced our way of working and the way we expect software to work, the way we expect companies to build software has changed dramatically. So as a leader, you're faced with this, right? As a leader on all levels, you're faced with this. And this is my first book tip of the day. Team of Teams, Stanley McChrystal, retired U.S. general, he talks about how today's changing world has actually gone from complicated to complex, and where we cannot possibly predict what's going on now and what's going on 5 seconds from now. So he talks about how we should get rid of hierarchy, essentially, and build essentially a mesh network of teams, mostly horizontal, to cope with the dizzying amount of challenges that the world is throwing at us at this point. The term high-performing teams has been coined for a few years already. The State of DevOps report has been referring to the high-performing team, I think the last 3 or 4 iterations. And there's other literature that's referring to high-performing teams as well. What does a high-performing team mean? Well, it's a team that, compared to other teams, is able to deploy, to release software, to change software, to adapt to changes faster, more resilient, less errors than a low-performing team. High-performing teams or mature teams typically are able to deal with at least some form of self-organization and may require less input from a leader than teams that are less mature. The world is fast moving. The world is incredibly fast moving. Companies are fast moving. What you're doing today, you will definitely not be doing a week after, and you may have pivoted in a few months' time completely. Continuous delivery in DevOps, what today and tomorrow is all about. Delivering things to production in a safe and sustainable way, so that we can release changes and functionality to production quickly and get feedback on that quickly. And we are doing all these things in small steps, rather than, broad strokes and big bang releases. No, we are doing things in small steps, dealing with mature teams or less mature teams that also need to do that. That we need to go coach and guide to a higher level quickly to be able to have them integrate. This, to me, asks from all of us leadership on multiple levels, in multiple ways. And what I mean by that is that leadership is not just only you telling a team what to do, but leadership can also be technical leadership. So we're talking about what type of platform to use, what type of technology, what type of programming language we're using, what type of cloud vendor, and what type of code style, going very in depth. This requires technical leadership. This requires technical vision. Where do we want to go as a company? And what's the technical roadmap or the technical vision that goes hand in hand with that? That requires leadership. That requires somebody with vision on that technical level and willing to carry that forward. It requires personal leadership, in my mind. Personal leadership meaning discipline, self-discipline, taking care of yourself, making sure that you get the right education, the right tools, the right training, that you fight for the right to go to conferences such as this one, that you take care of yourself, that you stay healthy and fit, that you sleep well, that you take time off, that you take care of your work-life balance. Personal leadership. And then there's transformational leadership, which could come across as a little bit of a buzzword, and to some degrees it is. But transformational leadership requires perseverance, because if you want to transform a company from the traditional way of doing things to the new way of doing things, the modern way of doing things, this requires perseverance. Why? Because it's always easier to push back than to pull forward. Pushing back isn't, at least from this point of view, it requires less energy than pulling you along to a new direction. So transformational leadership requires people that consistently keep going on and don't give up. I think that a good leader is all about getting things done. I myself am an optimistic pragmatist, which means that I will not necessarily cut corners, but I will try to get to the result in the quickest way possible. I want things to get done. And when they are done, then we can worry about making it more beautiful and making it better in small steps, in iteration. But I want feedback fast, so I want to get things done. I do think in this whole day and age, with self-organization, autonomous teams, that leaders add significant value. Because leaders can help teams become greater than the sum of their parts. I definitely believe that. As a matter of fact, and you can quote me on this, or you can quote Nicole Fortgren on this, and this is the Accelerate book, second book tip of the day. The real value of a leader is manifest in how they amplify the work of their team. Accelerate has a large section devoted to leadership and research on leadership in DevOps and IT. Very interesting to read about that. Before I talk a little bit about the traits that I think are part of effective leaders, let's shortly discuss a few leadership theories and leadership styles, which are essentially tools in the toolbox for a leader. When I talk about military leadership, people typically associate this with what I do. I don't necessarily yell at people quite a lot because it's not always as effective. This, by the way, is a photograph from boot camp for the US Marine Corps, which brings people from, civilian life, so wearing this attire, into that. And essentially what their goal behind this is we don't care what your background is, what you do in civilian life. After we're done with this, you're all Marines. It doesn't matter your skin color, your religious views, your personal views, you're all Marines. And the way that they do this is to create a group mentality, a sense of camaraderie. Like we went through this together and we are stronger as a team. It brings me to directive and participative leadership. Because directive and participative leadership are one of the more simple tools or buttons that you can tweak in terms of leadership style. On the left of the picture is the directive leadership style. It's basically, I say, you do. It provides clear goals, clear directions. It can be enforceable. Like, if you don't do this, you clean the toilet. If you don't do this, I withhold your salary. Something like that. It can be pretty dark, but directions, rules, enforcement, setting clear expectations. And then when we start moving to the right of the picture, we let our team in more. So we first propose a set of decisions or a set of options, and then we listen to feedback, and then we make a decision as leaders. The third is the team proposes a set of actions, and the leader listens and then decides from one of them. Then we build up to a joint decision with the team, so we collaborate, we talk about things, we decide on a course of action together. And at the far end of the scale, and this works if you have very mature teams that you essentially can leave alone, and potentially even should, you delegate the decision to the team. This is where I want to end up. I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'm sure that you will find a way because I trust you completely. Delegation. So that's the most participative on this scale. Then there's the pattern of the servant leader, which popped up a few years ago, I think in the context of Scrum initially, but I'm not entirely sure. The servant leader, as the term implies, says that a leadership is there to serve a team by providing the leadership that the team needs. That is a little bit abstract, but there are a few traits, a few things associated with the servant leader that I think are very important to be an effective servant leader. And the first one is listening. Be able to listen. As Andy Stanley said, leaders who don't listen will eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing to say. Which is interesting from a bubble point of view. You will never hear that you're not doing it well, or you'll never hear another opinion, and you'll be very blissfully unaware in your bubble. But it's not a good place to be as a leader. Servant leaders are able to persuade, change. So convince people to change things rather than telling them what to do. Because if you convince people, then ideas become internalized, become their own ideas, and become intrinsic, and as such become far stronger. A servant leader is committed to results, committed to a team, committed to the people in the team, committed to the well-being of the people in the team. Servant leaders bring people together. They form communities. They make sure that if you're dealing with a certain technology, that everybody that has something to say or knows something about that technology is able to find each other and is able to collaborate to the good of the company. They also support people in their education, their career path, their growth, coaching them, becoming better at hard skills or soft skills. And servant leaders are able to heal communities and heal rifts, to prevent escalation, or if things have escalated, to repair relationships so that they come out stronger at the other end. That's what the servant leader is all about, and that's what makes them very important parts of any company, I would say. Situational leadership is an older model that basically says, depending on the person or the situation that you are dealing with, adjust your style of leadership. Some people do not respond very well to directive leadership, where others almost seem to want that. And as a leader, you are supposed to get to know your people, of course, which also will help you find out what leadership style they respond to most effectively. And depending on the situation, you may require another leadership style as well. When I have a minute to explain things in an army context, for example, I'm not going to listen to people's opinions because there's simply no time. So I will be on the far left end of that directive leadership style. I will tell people what to do. But if there's more time, sure, we can explore options and discuss. So the situational leadership model essentially is connected to how people develop themselves in a particular skill. When we develop a particular skill, for example, driving a car, initially we will have low competence and high commitment. And hopefully at the end we'll arrive being highly competent and highly committed on this thing. When we start out, we are typically best served by a leader that is directive and supportive. Not super supportive, but a little bit. But mostly directive. You know, okay, turn the wheel that way. Select this gear. You need to be at that speed. Watch that thing. Take care of that bicycle, etc., etc. So you're being very directive. And then as people grow in their skill, you start to turn on the coaching. You become more supportive. Like, yes, you can do that. I've seen you done it before. This looks like that situation. Not telling them what to do necessarily, but more helping them discover what to do. And then we start turning on off the directive button. We become purely supportive. And at the far end of the scale, when people are highly competent and highly committed, we can delegate things to them. We don't tell them, okay, you need to get on this freeway and then on that freeway and take... No, I want you to go from there to there, deliver that thing. You figure out a route, you figure out a day, go do it. Situational leadership. And then, last but not least, there's mission command, which is an interesting form of leadership, which basically says that we as a leader set goals and effects that we want to achieve. And the funny thing is, this is an older, quite old version of leadership that originated in the Prussian army in the 19th century after they suffered a series of very humiliating defeats by Napoleon. The Prussian army set about changing the way that they do things. And they were a very directive, very hierarchical army before that. You know, a soldier is not supposed to question his orders, is not supposed to give opinions, is not supposed to give suggestions. No, is supposed to only execute what he's told to do. And that goes all up the way to the highest general. And even for a general, when he's confronted with a field marshal, for example, he's not supposed to say, this may be not such a good idea, or can I get some freedom of movement? No. And the Prussian army changed that completely. Because they said a favorable situation will never be exploited if somebody's waiting for orders. And this can be translated to the civilian, the IT world quite successfully. The US Army states that mission command is all about exercising authority and direction by the commander to enable initiative. And this is the keyword. Enable initiative within his sub-commanders. So by stating intent, so that they are empowered to become agile and adaptive leaders. This is completely transposable to IT, to any business really. Book tip number 3, The Art of Action by Stephen Bungay. Say what you want people to achieve and above all tell them why. Then ask to tell them, or then ask them to tell you what they are going to do as a result. So you're not going to tell people what to do, nor you're going to tell them what to achieve and why you said that to them. And then they set about deciding what to do within the context that you give them, and then they come back to you. This requires a clearly defined goal. Where do we want to go as an organization, as a team, as a group, as a department? Clearly defined constraints. This is the budget that we have available. These are the laws that are applicable to us. These are the countries that we want to do it in. This is the time that we have allotted, etc., etc. These are our constraints. This should lead to a shared understanding within the people that are going to execute that thing. Why are we doing this? And what do we want to achieve? So that we empower everybody to actually deal with that goal, to respond when things do not appear the way that we thought them to be. It also means that we need to appropriately train and educate our people so that they can deal with the things that we throw at them, or that the world, rather, throws at them, so that they have initiative and flexibility. Like the Prussian army changed its ways, it found out that locally things can develop in a myriad of ways. As we say in the army, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Which basically means that the moment we set out executing a plan, things go differently, not necessarily wrong, but differently from the way we expected. And this is not just the army. This is in any business, because we can plan as a business, but the moment we start executing that plan, we are confronted with all sorts of external actors, right? We are confronted with competitors that do not know about our plan, and if they knew, they are not going to stick to our plan, right? They have their own plan. Things like, the weather may occur, natural disasters, other stuff that essentially is going to throw our plans into disarray. And if we only care about execution, so we tell people what to do, and we don't actually tell them why or what we want to achieve, then if things start to happen, or if things don't act or occur the way we wanted them to do, then all of a sudden everybody's like, I don't know what to do now. Whereas if we give them initiative and flexibility and an understanding of what they need to achieve, the greater goal, then all of a sudden they can see, okay, this changes, this situation changes, but if I go left instead of right, then I can still achieve what my department wants to achieve. Or I can still achieve my thing within what the department wants to achieve. All this together, and a few other things on effective leaders. Effective leaders, to me, set the stage. They set the stage for a team to excel, for a team to work. Stanley McChrystal said, effective leaders stir an intangible but very real desire within people, within teams, within departments. And you can quote me on this, an effective leader enables a team to reach its full potential, whatever that potential is. It's all about the team being bigger than the sum of their parts. An effective leader is about removing obstacles. And for those of you that have dealt with Scrum, yes, obstacles can mean impediments, but there can be a lot more obstacles than just impediments. And as a leader, it's a good thing if you can remove those obstacles and help the team move forward. A leader develops people. A leader makes sure that they get the right knowledge, right education, right training, that they are able to pair program, for example, with a lot of people in the team, in the organization, to develop their skills. That they are able to go to conferences and meetups, and that they're able to buy books and go to courses, etc., etc. But an often forgotten and underlooked part of developing people is that a leader should also develop leaders. Within the army, for example, this is a natural thing. We are continuously training our replacements. And in the IT world or in the business world at large, I don't see that as much. We don't, at least not from within the companies themselves, detect and select people that have demonstrated a sort of aptitude or attitude about leadership and give them the amounts of training that they need to go further in the company. And yes, there are companies that do that. But I think they are more the exception than the rule. Developing leaders. Developing personal leadership in individuals as well. And stimulating technical leadership in individuals as well. Not everybody has to be a lead developer or a development manager or an IT manager. But leadership can be stimulated in so many ways in a lot of people. Another book tip. Dave Marquette, former US Marine or US Navy submarine captain. He was talking about a submarine which he got the command of and which underperformed, really. And what he ended up doing, he found a submarine which was completely geared to the leader-follower structure. Leader says, we do. Leader says jump, we ask how high. And if the leader says something silly, we're not going to confront him about that. So he ended up on a submarine where he gave a command about the engine settings, which was duly repeated down the line, and then nothing actually happened. As it turned out, the command he gave was actually not applicable to that submarine. That engine setting did not exist on that particular submarine. But nobody told him, like, Captain, the thing you're now saying is kind of silly because that doesn't exist on our submarine. Nobody was in a position to confront him about his little failure, essentially, his little piece of misunderstanding. And so he found out that he needed to essentially turn that ship around and do it another way. And he developed leaders. And so his idea of leader means that he, as the captain of the submarine, should be able to leave from time to time without the whole submarine falling apart. And while it is, from a personal standpoint, it's very flattering if you leave a team and the team falls to pieces, because, without that guy, we are completely screwed. We are helpless. From a personality point of view, that's very cool. It's very flattering. But from an organizational or team point of view, it's really not. So my view is try to make yourself replaceable as fast as you can, rather than irreplaceable. And that was his point as well. It's best when we are all leaders. Effective leaders give space to people. They give space for people to grow, to experiment, safe space, to fail, to make mistakes. I'm not sure who the quote is from, but there's a guy who once said, "Don't come to me with problems, only come to me with solutions." What do you think the result is of that? He's not going to hear about anything that's happening in the company anymore. By simply stating that simple sentence, there's a huge consequence to people not approaching him with the things that go wrong, but only with things that go right. And there's things that go right. There's always things that go right, but there are always things that go wrong. And I would rather hear about them as quickly as possible so that we can all deal with that, rather than hearing it way, way, way down the line when it has spun out of control and we can really not do anything about it anymore. So give space for people to actually make mistakes, to come to you with problems. Empower your, I was going to say followers, but that is the wrong verb here, or the wrong word. Empower the people that you are able to serve as a leader. Empower them by giving them room, by equipping them with all the right knowledge, all the right training, and the freedom of execution, essentially, the freedom of action. Trust that they will do the right thing most of the time. Nobody's perfect, so they will make mistakes. Hell, you will as a leader. Trust me on that. I've made my fair share. But trust your team that they will make the right call most of the time, that they will do the right thing most of the time. Important traits then for an effective leader that I consider important traits. Things that I've seen other leaders do that I'm very inspired about, or things that I've seen other leaders do that I was not very impressed about. Sun Tzu said a leader leads by example and not by force. And he was a very wise guy, this Sun Tzu, but what this means is that people will copy behavior. And one of the most clear examples that I can give is take a transportation minister, for example, that is setting up new guidelines and laws about speeding cameras, and then is caught speeding, doing 180 on 100 highway. Is his story still credible? Maybe not so much. Does he put an example that he may not want to put out there? Probably. So people will copy behavior. And it's important to realize that as a leader, especially if you get more and more responsibility, that you are in the spotlights, if you will, and that your behavior will maybe be looked at more strictly than the behavior of others. This also means that as a leader, you need to have integrity. And you cannot have 50% integrity, I think. You either have it or you don't. And integrity is a difficult, well, not necessarily difficult, but it's sometimes difficult to define what integrity means. I think we all have a concept of what integrity is and what isn't. So, dealing with people the way you want them to deal with you. And having a strong set of core values. Dealing with similar situations in a similar way. Not giving friends a leg up, etc. Leaders show empathy. Empathy means looking at things from another person's point of view. Being mindful of their view at the world. Not necessarily condoning their behavior if they did something that's not acceptable, but at least understanding where they're coming from and why they are doing things. And being compassionate as well. Being present, being available, being there. Saying the door is always open, but you're not actually there. Leading from the front, if you will. Being approachable. I met a leader once that said, my door is always open, and it literally was. But he projected an aura, don't bother me. The way he moved through the office, through the hallway, he projected an aura, I'm very busy with things. We never really found out what things, but he was busy. And he projected an aura of, we're not going to bother that guy because he's so busy. Which meant that he started missing things. And people started, not telling him about important stuff. Be responsible. One of my favorite anecdotes to tell, one of my least favorite anecdotes to remember, happened a couple of years ago at a client I was consulting, where we were, as a bunch of external consultants, we were on a project, a large project, which ran into a funding problem, which meant difficult decision to make. We have to cut 50% of the staff, that's a serious cut, right? Even though it was all contractors, it was still a nasty decision, and it upset a lot of people, as rightfully it would. However, the decision is not necessarily the thing in play here. What happened was this person, high up in the organization, made the decision, good reasoning, but then instead of telling us all himself personally, they actually gave that job, they delegated that to a junior leader. And told them, okay, you need to tell 50, 60 folks that about half of them we're not going to see after this week has passed. Which is not a cool thing to say, right? But lo and behold, this guy was actually on his phone off to the side of the organization room, like it was a big open plan space. He was calling. And so he handed this task of telling people the bad news to somebody who was not really set up for that and found it very difficult to do, while he was visible on his phone to the left. This is not responsible behavior. As a matter of fact, he lost all credibility as a leader with me, and I would almost say the rest of the team at that point. Which is why it's a favorite but not so favorite anecdote of me. A leader is adaptable. When things veer left where you thought they would veer right, well, don't try to stick to your plan, but instead be adaptable, be flexible, deal with the sudden change and go with it. Embrace change rather than work against it. Be communicative. When things are happening in the company, and yes, you may function as what they call a shit umbrella. You know, you deal with all the things so that the team doesn't have to deal with that. One of the downsides of that is that the team will never ever know all the things that are playing out above their heads or beyond their team. So do let people know what is going on. That leads to understanding. Make decisions. The worst decision is the decision you don't make. Perfect decisions don't exist. Perfect information doesn't exist. So if you wait for the perfect information to come and the perfect decision to present itself, you're going to wait a long time. So accept the fact that you're going to make bad decisions from now and then. But the worst decision is the one you don't make. Be vulnerable. I've had a discussion about this very topic a few weeks ago. Somebody said to me, vulnerability is weak. And I said, no. I think being vulnerable is being strong. Because if you're vulnerable, you show that you're just as human as everybody else you're dealing with. That you can make as many mistakes, that you can feel just as rotten when you're sick, that you can feel sad when your favorite cat or your dog has died. You know, you're just human, and you need to show that. Don't project a strong image just because the world asks for it. No, be vulnerable. It's not a weakness. Know your limitations, though. And those limitations may change, but know when you get cranky because you've not gotten enough sleep, and you start yelling at people because you've not gotten enough sleep, and you start getting cranky. Know your limitations. Know yourself well. Get to know yourself well. And like I said, with mature teams, or teams that have become mature due to your help, know when to get out of the way. As Steve Jobs said, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and then tell them what to do. We hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do, and we can get the hell out of their way and let them do awesome things. Closing off, improve your leadership day by day, step by step. And I know this is not easy. Just look at any bookstore and look at the section leadership. If leadership were easy, there would be one book. But there's thousands and thousands and thousands, and they keep getting written every day. New books come out because new insights get developed and people have different takes on different subjects. So it's not easy. It's very personal. You will all, if you not already have, but you will find your own style and your own way of doing things. But keep experimenting, keep doing things, keep trying things. Find your own leadership style. But be flexible enough to deviate from it when the situation requires it. I found out that my natural leadership style is mostly on the directive side of things. But over time, I've learned to essentially dial that down and involve people much more and be a servant leader and be a leader that enables participative leadership and delegation. But I've had to learn that, and I've had to come out of my comfort zone, essentially, to deal with that. And for other people, it may be the other way around. Be open. Be open to the things that happen around you. Be open to new knowledge. Be open to literature, to education. Be open to training. Be open to the world. And be open to feedback on how you are doing things as a leader. How you come across as a leader. How people see you. And you may even ask people from outside of your company or other leaders inside your company to observe you from time to time. How am I coming across? How do people see me? Is my way of leading as effective as I think it is? Or are there things that I can adjust and improve? And by all means, keep learning. I'll probably learn about leadership until the day that I stop working, and probably even after that. But be open to learning continuously. As Anthony J. said, the only real training for leadership, though, is leadership. I thank you for your attention.